Hi, CP. So, what I want to do is give you a sense of some questions that came to my mind as I was reading, and then let's discuss some ways to address them. So, as I'm looking at this document, right here, the yellow highlights are things that I see as really central to your argument. And so you introduce very early, second paragraph, the idea of dispositions, and you cite these 6 studies. And then the ways in which, and then you talk about these perspectives, this work on dispositions has helped scholars understand some of the ways people apply theories in practice and reflection. Um, and then disposition studies have not yet addressed. Okay, so this seems like a gap right here, but you've only given me really 2 sentences about the research that's been done in dispositions. So we want a much clearer gap. I have tons of questions about dispositions. So what does this sentence mean? For instance, if this project is rooted in dispositions. Now, first of all, the feedback you got from Linda and Nisha was some pushback on that. I know that Linda is somewhat skeptical of this. And dispositions, when we're thinking about what's in the mind, I mean, that's kind of the realm of psychology. And so talking about the dispositions, you say, without understanding dispositions, instructors must rely on anecdote or personal experience to lead students to skills associated with invention. All right, so I know some of these studies. Let's focus on Wordle, which is the problem-dwelling, problem-solving, or generating disposition. So it implies that because of this study, we have information that would help students develop a problem generating or solving disposition. So I would like evidence in here that more discussion, that this research on dispositions actually shows us how to teach for it. Right now, I'm not seeing that evidence, and that's a critical assumption that this project is based upon. So if you are going to ground this, if this is a study of dispositions, which is the way that it's currently framed, you have a lot of stuff on dispositions and their relationship to RIST. And we need then much more information about what the status quo is in terms of research on dispositions. What has it enabled us to do, and much more to say why teams are a special, why we need it on teams. So you see, disposition studies has not yet adequately addressed the ways in which people adopt habits of mind favorable to rhetorical invention, specifically in workplace teams. So have they addressed ways in which people adopt habits to mind favorable to rhetorical invention in other situations? How has this research even addressed ways in which people adopt? Because that's not my understanding from what I read of the research. It doesn't really show us how people develop those dispositions. It just has named some different dispositions and their effects. We don't really know how to change them. So, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that some of this research has shown that. And you are right that the next step is teams. There's just not enough information on the page. And even if I had read all of these studies, I haven't read them as closely as you have. So I want, if it's going to be on dispositions, then I think that that needs to be unpacked a lot more. The other option is to not focus on dispositions and just make this a study on what are the obstacles to rhetorical invention, what are things that allow, and we can find different obstacles, but how do people get around those obstacles? So, for instance, if and one strategy I want you to do is imagine, okay, what's the research question? What's the question I would ask in an interview? Then answer that question yourself and see what does that tell you. Can you, what does that tell us? And imagine some different answers. So the research question I imagined was that you could ask someone, can you think of a project where you wanted to spend more time delving into ideas than your teammates, or you wanted to explore an option that was then supported? And can you think of a time where the team really did spend lots of time exploring, delving into different ideas? So when I think of a project where I wanted more time delving into things, I'm thinking of a project I'm on right now where we're discussing a bunch of things for changing education. And one of the issues that it hasn't become a direct issue yet, but one of the team members has real strong ownership of one possible tool that we might use. I think that this tool has some merits, but there are some weaknesses in it. I would really like to revisit that tool. I would like to redraft it. Sort of say, we learned some things, here are some parts of it we want to keep. Let's get rid of the rest, or reconsider or reevaluate that. And I really think that that's not going to fly. That this person just sees it's about an hour and a half of instruction. It sees that as a unit. So my strategy for working with this person is to find a context where, there isn't an hour and a half of time, but maybe if we could take this 15 minutes out, this one small segment of this tool, it would apply here. So we could use it in this way. And I'm hoping that after breaking it up in several ways, we might say, here are the parts that we keep reusing, and maybe the others aren't quite as strong. The other thing that I'm thinking of doing is just waiting for other people to comment on it, outside users, and kind of use that data to show, to be like, this part maybe isn't working. So these are some strategies that I have. I'm not sure what value added there is labeling these dispositions. And it's quite possible this other person I'm thinking of, while she's a lot of ownership of her thing, she's in other aspects I see her open-minded. I think it's just this one aspect of the project. So I don't think that her disposition is something inherent. So So if you want to keep the dispositions in here, I really want some evidence that teachers have used what they know about, well, it's not just because you could show evidence maybe that teachers use what they know of dispositions to modify their pedagogy, but that doesn't really seem relevant to teams because teachers won't be in there to change it. We don't want with the dispositions, some are good and some are bad, so we don't want to really share that information with students and be like, oh, this person on your team has a problem dwelling disposition. I think the obvious response is, well, then I don't want this person on my team. So we don't want that. So really show what the value added is of knowing the dispositions here. What does that enable us to do vis-a-vis teamwork that we couldn't do before? From your pilot study. First of all, I know because we've talked about this before, and you do say later on that Diane and Sahana are student teams in the same class, but that isn't clear. You say they're from the same pilot study, but that doesn't mean they're from the same class. So clarify that early on. But I'm not sure. I'm not persuaded of the interpretation here. So Diane, they have a strategy whiteboard. They didn't do it. Is it because she lacked a disposition? How do you know that? So, I mean, because she says that time was an issue. So did they just not have time? Maybe the thing is it sounds like she maybe wanted to do it. Maybe she thinks her teammates are idiots and there's no point in doing that. Maybe she was stressed on time. Maybe she's not motivated to get a good grade on the project, especially if she's a senior. I find a lot of times seniors, spring semester, they're just, I mean, their GPA doesn't matter anymore. They have a job. Is she in that bucket? So there's whole lots of things that isn't necessarily her disposition. Let's see. And it's, okay, so here you're suggesting this disposition belongs to Diane, and here the disposition seems to belong to the team, or the team's idea that the team didn't have a disposition. I mean, we can certainly go through and label teams. I just don't know what that does for us. Now, in Sahana's example, sorry about my dog barking. So we have Sahana's idea, and you say, well, this shows that she listens, and I guess it does because they adopt the idea. Let's see. Did she bring? I'm not sure who brought the idea back to the table. Oh, it brought us back to the table. But you say this represents an example of a team member adding depth to an idea. I don't see how she's adding depth. Just sounds like, oh, somebody, the HCI team brought up again a custom base, and they said, okay, we can give that a try, even though we think it won't work. Now, the motivation here might have been just like, oh, it might be just similar. Her motivation might have been she wants to be friendly or wants to be seen like a good, take one for the team kind of thing. It sounds like she wasn't really buying into the idea. So just not clear of how this is adding depth. It just seems like she agreed to spend a little bit of effort to try out somebody else's idea. And so up here you see what remains unclear is the dispositional differences. I'm not persuaded that's the difference between them. yeah, so here, maybe the amount of time they had. Sahana just liked her teammates, or she trusted them more than Diane did. And you suggest these explanations for why Diane might not have done it. And I'm like, yeah, why not one of those? And so you want to know why Sahana used her inventional strategy. And maybe it's just like, oh, I had some time. I thought I might as well try it. And that way I could say I tried it. I also don't know how long it took. All right. And then you say knowing what leads people to change their dispositions. So in neither case do we see any change in disposition. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. And down here, we don't know the decisions and thinking Sahana undertook. And I'm just not sure that that was an example of depth. Possibly invention because she tried the idea. So what I'd like to know, just for my own pedagogy, for my own collaborations, is okay. I'm not sure these questions are answerable, or if the answer would lead to change. But if I come up with somebody who I think is an obstacle to rhetorical invention, to pursuing a better quality idea, to exploring all of the options, or reconsidering something that I think needs to be reconsidered, what are some good strategies that I have? So one strategy that I have developed through my experience working in the GCC is when I encounter student paper that needs to be totally rewritten, I don't suggest that till we brainstormed a new paper, and then it's a lot easier to get someone to envision, because it's like, oh, well, but you have all these ideas, you just need to make it more formal. So that's one strategy. Or when I encounter teachers who might be resistant to a change that, as a communication expert, I want them to adopt. Sometimes I'll just be like, I'll just send them a sample rubric, or I'll give something to them, and then that dissipates their resistance. They're like, oh, okay, now that I see that, that would be easier. So what are these strategies to overcome an obstacle? So what I think I would like to see from you next time, because I don't want you to keep writing draft after draft on this, is why don't you come up with research question, an interview question that really will answer the research question. Then 3 possible responses that are realistic responses to the interview question. And it could be a series of questions, but make sure that the questions are all very, very highly linked, so that they're all kind of, so it could be a question and then some follow-up. So 3 possible responses. Think back from your own experience, maybe talk to somebody, just talk to a friend, ask them, think about, a reflection question, and see what kind of responses you get. Then how you can take those responses and extract them into a teachable principle. Okay, so let's just kind of imagine this all the way from beginning to end here, from a research question to something that could be implemented in the classroom. And then we can worry about how do we lead up to this research question. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. We can meet soonish. I'll reply in your email to meeting times.